Hello everyone, I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So in this video, we are going to discuss and take up the important articles from 30th of January's newspaper. So firstly, we see that student enrollments in higher studies, they have increased by 7.5% in 2020-21 period. And this is as per the All India Survey on Higher Education, which is released by the Union Education Ministry. And when we have a look at this graph, we see that this red color is showing it for females and blue is for males. So in integrated courses, certificate, diploma, and PG diploma courses, you see the share of males is higher. But as we move on to undergraduation, post graduation, and MPhil, the share of women is increasing, and female enrollment as a share of the total, it stood at 49%. So we can say that there is certain kind of equality here, and there's a notable increase in the OBC students enrollment since 2014-15, and the proposed proportion of the Muslim students that has dropped. The number of students in the persons with disability category that has also dropped. So these are the findings from this survey. So here we'll take up we'll be talking about the reforms in the MG Narega scheme. And we see that, like most recently, the concern of the central government is over the program's regressive spending pattern, where the poorer states they spend less MG Narega funds than the better off ones. However, obviously, the poorer states they should also spend more on this scheme. So MG Narega, it is underperforming because its most basic design principles they have been forgotten or they've been willfully ignored. So, firstly, there's a need to address the violation of the entitlements, the wages. So there are delays in the wage payments to the workers that are working under this scheme. So we need to address this delay in the wage payments to restore the faith of the workers in the program. And in 2016, Supreme Court of India directed the government to ensure that wages they were paid on time, and calling the act of making workers wait for wages for months, it was equivalent to forced labor. So this was the Supreme Court judgment that if wages are not paid on time and the workers they are made to wait for several months, it amounts to forced labor. And despite that, we have not seen any significant improvement in this thing. And when we understand, we see that 7 or more functionaries they have to sign off before the payment due to a worker can be approved. So the process, we can say, it is not as smooth as it should be. So it requires a lot of approvals, and this is stage 1. In stage 1, you require uh, around 7 to more functionaries to sign off the payment that is to be disbursed. And in contrast, when we look at the process of loans from private banks, so that is done, we can say, in a much simpler manner. So that is there, and Ministry of Rural Development, it must simplify the payment process, and it has to be transparent about pending wage payments in stage 1 and stage 2, so that the bottlenecks they can be corrected. And the second reform is we need to strengthen the implementation capacities where the expenditure is low, instead of curbing the expenditure where employment generation is high. So the focus should be upon implementing the capacities where the expenditure is low. So that should be the major focus. And states which are spending more, they are implementing the programs better because they have better capacities. And there has to be a focus on exclusion and not the inclusion errors. So the online management information system of the NREGA, it can flag areas where entitlements they are violated, instead of being used as a tool by the bureaucrats to centralize and control the things. And thirdly, we need to run the program like a demand-based law and not like a scheme. So intermittent and unpredictable fund releases by the central government, they are one of the fundamental reasons why the state governments they are unable to ensure the full potential of the NREGA scheme. So focus should be more upon the demand-based. thing, and not, we should not look at it from a perspective of a scheme. Then, fourthly, we need to make discussions on any proposed reforms participatory. So, obviously, participation of people is required when we are, like, whenever we go with discussions regarding the reforms in this scheme. And fifthly, it is time the government of India it makes an earnest attempt to map the impact of each of its reforms on access to and expenditure of the Narega, particularly in poorer states. And certain technologies like the national mobile monitoring system, but we saw that this app it failed to capture the attendance of the workers, and they have been denied their wages because of this thing. And reforms to Narega it must prioritize the access of workers to entitlements with ease and dignity rather than focus on administrative and fiscal efficacy alone. So three things must be focused upon, and we have discussed like five types of reforms which are required under this scheme. Then like in the backdrop of the incidents regarding the Adani group and its crashing stock prices, so we see that India's regulatory framework it must infuse more confidence in investors and the savers. So the spotlight is back on India's regulatory environment, which involves the Securities and Exchange Board of India and even RBI. So Adani Group, it has been accused of stock manipulation and questionable accounting practices by a US-based Hindenburg Group. So that is there, and so in that backdrop, we see that the regulatory framework of the capital market has been in news. So SEBI it has stepped up scrutiny of the conglomerates transactions, and there has been no official word from the markets regulator when we can say that such a big kind of incidents has happened, or it has been accused of stock manipulation. And India's regulators, including SEBI and RBI, they have an opportunity now, not an obligation, to clear the air by allaying the fears of any broader systematic contagion. And apart from that, regulators they could also enhance the credibility in India as an investment destination by tightening not just the listing requirements, but more crucially, the enforcement actions in case of the egregious breaches of the law. And the global debate over the credibility of the credit ratings that has suffered from time to time, whether in the wake of the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s or the global financial crisis of 2007-8, it is also a concern that India's regulators they need to re-engage with all of this. So these are several aspects which obviously requires the regulators' attention. And revisiting the tax treatment of the tobacco products, which can be, we can say, one of the main sources of revenue for the government. And Adam Smith, he in his famous work, in his famous book that is titled The Wealth of Nations, he argued that commodities such as sugar, rum, and tobacco, though they are not necessary for life, but they are widely consumed and thus good candidates for taxation. So even when we talk about the father of economics, Adam Smith, so he said that obviously they can prove to be a good source for revenue for the government. And when we look at the situation in India, the tobacco taxes they have not increased significantly since the implementation of GST in 20. Obviously, GST was implemented in 2017. So since then, we have not seen any increase in any kind of taxes on the tobacco products, and making these products increasingly affordable for the people, and obviously this promotes their consumption, and obviously it has detrimental effect on their health. So tobacco use is also the cause for nearly 3,500 deaths in India every single day, which impacts the human capital and the GDP growth in a negative way. So the issue is with the taxation system in India. So one issue is the overuse of the ad valorem taxes. So ad valorem taxes basically they are implied on the value of a commodity or a service that is bought or sold. So which are not effective in reducing the consumption of these tobacco products. And many countries they use a specific or mixed tax system for the harmful products. So that should a B1 area which needs to be deliberated upon. And the GST system in India, it relies more on ad valorem taxes than the pre-GST system, which primarily uses specific excise taxes. So before GST, we had the system of specific excise taxes for the tobacco products and tobacco. But after GST, we are relying more upon ad valorem taxes. So which is obviously not, we can say, not curbing the consumption of such harmful products. So in India, the share of the central excise duty in the total tobacco taxes is decreased substantially from pre-GST to post-GST for the cigarettes. So after GST, we see that the share of tobacco taxes, it has decreased substantially. And here the figures are also cited when we look at the case for cigarettes. So their share have reduced from 54% to 8%, for smokeless tobacco from 59% to 11%, for BDs from 17% to 1%. So this is, we can say, one of the negative fallouts post implementation of GST. And inflation indexing, it should be made mandatory for any specific tax rates applied on tobacco products. So discrepancies in the product taxation. So when we look at different types of taxes that are imposed on different tobacco products, even in that case, we have large discrepancies in taxation. So when we look at the figures, so we see that despite the cigarettes, they accounting for only 15% of the tobacco users, they are like, they solely generate 80% or more of the tobacco taxes. So 80% of the tobacco taxes, they come from cigarette consumption, and which accounts for only 15% of the tobacco users. And in case of BDs and the smokeless tobacco, they have low taxes, which encourages their consumption. And taxes, they should be made more consistent across all the tobacco products. So this discrepancy must not be there. And as none is more or less harmful than the other, so obviously we cannot categorize any tobacco product to be less harmful or more harmful. All are equally harmful, so they must be taxed equally on the same level field. And the main principle behind the tobacco taxation, it should be in the protecting the public health. So GST rates on certain smokeless tobacco ingredients such as tobacco leaves, tendu leaves, betel leaves, areca nuts, etc., they have been either zero or from ranging between 5% to 18% of the GST. And GST currently, it exempts small businesses with less than rupees 40 lakh annual turnover. So again, specifically like the smokeless tobacco and the BD manufacturers, they are working in the informal sector, so they are not under the GST net. And this obviously promotes more of manufacturing of such products, so it reduces the tax base on these products. So this should be like looked into. And before GST, taxing the tobacco, it was a way for the state governments to increase the revenue and regulate the consumption. And like when we have a look at different states, so Rajasthan had a 65% VAT on tobacco products. After GST, the states, they can no longer raise the taxes on tobacco, so which hinders their ability to increase the revenue and regulate the consumption of the tobacco and tobacco products. So this is one more concern. And India has not increased the taxes on any tobacco products in over 5 years. So this may undo much of the progress seen in 17% reduction in the tobacco use from 2009-10 to 2016-17. So we see that tobacco consumption, although it has reduced by 17%, but this gain can be reversed if we do not take steps uh, like quickly, and obviously in the context of the points that we have discussed through this article. Then we see that LIC, it still continues to bet on Adani Group. It buys around 9,15,000 more shares of Adani. So again, LIC is supporting it. So obviously, firstly, investigation must be there, and people's money is being like pumped into such companies who are alleged of stock discrepancies and stock manipulation. So because of this thing, obviously, consumers or citizens' money should not be put into higher risk if there is any like problem. And portfolio investors, they have pulled out from the Indian markets of around rupees 17,000 crores. So This was mainly because of the attractiveness of the Chinese markets since they have been opened up, and the cautious stance adopted by the investors ahead of the meeting the US Federal Reserve as well. So, because of these two concerns, and obviously, when money moves out of the Indian economy, it adds up to pressure upon the Indian rupee. So, we can say Indian rupee it depreciates because of this. Then we talk about dementia. So here, dementia, it is a clinical syndrome which is caused by a range of diseases or injuries to the brain. And most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease, which is implicated in up to 70% of the dementia diagnosis. So early symptoms, it includes the absent-mindedness, difficulty recalling the names and words, and difficulty retaining the new information. And as the disease it progresses, there is a marked memory loss and loss of other cognitive skills. Then again, an important article. So India has done well in terms of aggregate growth over the last year. So here this article includes the view of former chief economic advisor. So we see that um, when he was asked a question, Mr. Kaushik Basu sir, so how is India's economy doing at the moment? So he feels that in terms of the aggregate growth over the last year, India has done well, especially in the context of the current global situation. So obviously, India has strong macroeconomic fundamentals, and we proved to be a resilient economy. And obviously, we saw like few time ago that IMF also said that India is a bright spot globally. So it is mainly because of two reasons. For firstly, the RBI it has done a skillful job in terms of the monetary policy and management of the interest rates judiciously to dampen the inflation, and it has used forex reserves strategically. And secondly, India has conducted its foreign policy with a measure of finesse, and this has had a positive fallout in the economy. So two factors: monetary policy management by RBI and our foreign policy. So as we saw that cracks between the West and China, they grow deeper. The global players, they're now looking at India as a potential investment destination. So we can say it has created an opportunity for India. And when the question arises that state of economy is not a major talking point today, despite several consecutive years of slowing growth. So, he was asked that can you elaborate on why economic growth matters? So he says that the mistake is to treat growth as an end in itself. So its importance is as an instrument to spread well-being in the entire population. So unfortunately, the growth that is occurring in India is disproportionately at the top end. So he's pointing towards the economic inequality in India, and he's pointing towards the fact that growth is occurring at the topper end, at the richer class level, and the rich they are getting more richer over time. And we also saw that the Oxfam report it said the top 10% population in India holds about 70% of the total wealth. So that is the scale and the level and the intensity of economic inequality in India. And India's youth unemployment rate it stands at 28.3%, which is almost double that of the most East and the Southeast Asian nations. So again, we have a higher unemployment rate. And when we talk about the debt to GDP ratio, even that remains high. So that is somewhere around 85% right now. So when we talk about the quality of India's institutions today, so he said that an economy relies not just on the economic policy solely, but there are other important factors which includes the political, legal, and social institutions, and also on the trust and the confidence among the citizens in those institutions. So these they have been eroded over the last few years with increasing polarization, and this erosion, unlike the bad economic policy, it does not have an immediate effect on the economy, but it weakens the foundations and it could cause long run damage. So that is there when we talk about the erosion of the quality of the institutions in India. And one clear sign that the institutional foundations and the trust were growing was India's investment rate, which rose steadily. So our investment rate has increased, and between 2011-12, the investment it reached somewhere around 39%. So That is one positive development, but after that, it has come down steadily in 2019 to 20 period, and it is now at 32.3%. So these were all important points which you should be aware of. So that's all from the Hindu. Now we'll take up the Financial Express. So again, here we have two important articles to be discussed. One is regarding the trade between India and China. So we are focusing upon curbing down or bringing down the imports from China, because obviously we've seen that our dependence upon China, it has increased. So in this context, India is working towards reducing its decades-old heavy import reliance on China through a calibrated approach. So we are taking up a calibrated approach, seeking to steadily move away from the unreliable supply chains that threaten its exports as well as the economic growth prospects over the medium to the long term. So under this backdrop, the imports of the low grade products. So, China is considered the biggest supplier of such items, low grade products that could be tackled with the firming up of the standard specifications for a larger number of products. So, firstly, we can like come up with certain kind of standards for the products that we are importing from China. And apart from that, industry would also be encouraged to explore more vigorously the alternative sources, sourcing destinations that can supply the inputs that we are importing right now from China. And apart from that, we need to like explore the options under the resilient supply chain initiative that has been formed up by Japan and Australia, and raising the local manufacturing capacity could be there, for which like the government has launched the production linked incentive schemes. And also there should be removal of the inverted import duty structures. So can we talk about, when we try to understand what is inverted import duty structure? So here, like when we are importing inputs, so the inputs, they are taxed higher compared to the finished goods that we are importing. So this is called inverted import duty structure. And also the WTO compliant tools like anti-dumping duties, they can be imposed. So India's imports from China, they grew 15%, whereas when we talk about our exports to China, though they have crashed by 37%. So this has obviously, we can say, increased our trade deficit with China to $58 billion in the first 8 months of financial year 2023. And we are like, China was India's biggest supplier of the intermediate goods. So we import intermediate goods majorly from China. And so, as a first step, when we talk about what is the first step being taken by the government, so firstly, we are identifying the non-essential and the substandard imports. So, which obviously most of them are coming from China. So, once we prepare this list, so after that, the government would be looking at the alternatives of like making those products available. Like firstly, it could be like we can push more of local manufacturing, and secondly, we can have a look and like find out other sources, other countries from where we can import those products. So this is going to be the first step. And now we'll move on to the next article. So here, this is a very, very important article. Here it is talking about the scenario after the post-subsidy path to the agricultural export growth in the context of India and the developing countries. So this is in the backdrop of that under WTO, the developing countries, they were allowed to provide the subsidies to the agricultural sector up till 2023. So after 2023, the developing countries, they cannot provide export subsidies to the agricultural products, or like solely the export subsidies. So in that backdrop, when the developing countries, they will not be able to provide the export subsidies, so what are the alternative options available for them to promote their exports? So given the global uncertainty that has been caused firstly by the Russia-Ukraine war, secondly by the pandemic, thirdly by the fear of recession that we are seeing now, and Because of all these three challenges, we are seeing that Indian agricultural exporters and farmers, they have high expectations from the upcoming budget to address these concerns. So diversifying the export baskets and also the destinations, and focusing more upon value addition and trade facilitating measures, they are going to be now pivotal in enhancing the agricultural exports. So I will repeat: focusing upon the diversification of the export baskets and the destinations, focusing on the value addition and trade facilitating measures, and also when we can say that spending more upon the creation of infrastructure, we can say the capacities domestically. So these would be playing an important role in promoting the agricultural exports. And agricultural export subsidies, they would not be maintainable under WTO after 2023. This I've told you. And before the establishment of WTO, some countries or regions, specifically the Western countries and even European Union, they were providing massive export subsidies to dump their agricultural products. But during that time period, obviously, developing countries were not doing something like this. So these members, they acquired the flexibility to provide export subsidies under the WTO's agreement on agriculture. And surprisingly, this flexibility, which was ruled out for other members, including India, so who historically they did not give such export subsidies to their farmers, but a certain kind of flexibility was provided to these developed countries, we can say. So, under the special and differential treatment, which was obviously under WTO, the developing countries, including India, they could provide the export subsidies only for reducing the marketing and the transportation costs for the agricultural products. So, for two reasons: for reducing their marketing and the transportation cost. So, under the special and differential treatment, the developing countries, they were allowed to provide the export subsidies. And under the Nairobi ministerial decision in 2015, it gave a breakthrough where all the members, they agreed to eliminate the export subsidies. So the decision, it was however extended that under the special and differential treatment provision, so the export subsidies for the developing countries is going to be uh, for the end of 2023, and for the least developing countries, they can provide export subsidies up till 2030. So since we have entered into 2023, so obviously we need to explore what are the alternative options available to promote the agricultural exports. So in 2018, the US, it challenged India's export related measures at WTO, which has implications for both agriculture and non-agriculture products. And also in second instance, Australia, Brazil, and Guatemala, they brought a dispute on the domestic support and the export subsidy that India was providing for sugar sector in 2019 to WTO. But these disputes, they still remain unresolved because there is non-appointment of the judges or to the appellate body of WTO. So that is there. And when we talk about the challenges, so firstly is the domestic infrastructural inefficiencies that exist. Secondly, the international quality standards that should be met. Thirdly, inadequate export and market promotion measures. So these are the three main challenges that we have right now. And measures that have been taken by the government recently, it includes developing the district as export hub. So as we have the scheme of one district, one product, so that is there. Then there is e-certificates for the export purposes. There is Krishi Udan, which is going to assist the farmers in transportation. There is development of the enterprise and service hub, which is Desh. Then we have the remission of duties and taxes on the exported products. So recently, we also launched the production linked incentive schemes to promote more of domestic manufacturing. So India's agricultural exports, they have increased in 2021-22, and India's government, it has been proactively engaged in trade agreements with several countries as well. So India has a long way to go to achieve its target of $100 billion by 2030 when we talk about agricultural exports. And market development and the proactive role of the state governments definitely is going to be critical now. And we need to improve the traceability of the agricultural commodities, which can negate the concerns regarding the biosecurity and food safety and improve the market access. So APEDA, it is its traceability system for the horticultural products like the grape net. So it is a step in the right direction. And additionally, the product differentiation and branding, it would be key to compete in the international market. And apart from that, India can leverage the geographical indication tag that it enjoys for several products, and those products they can be exported at a premium price. So these are certain opportunities that are still there, and obviously we need to overcome and deal with the challenges that we have right now. And certain schemes have already been launched by the government in this context. So this was all for today. Thank you for joining in, Sarkari. You'll get the PDF link in the description box. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us.